I don't expect you to do everything just right the first time, but when you mess up, we're going to talk about it. And sometimes customers aren't actually always right. Customers and clients can have bad behavior also. And when they do have bad behavior and we talk about it and address it and nothing changes, we get to fire clients sometimes.
Welcome to Encouraging Leaders, a podcast that exists to remind CEOs and aspiring CEOs that they are not alone. I'm Mark DeBron, and today we're joined by an encouraging leader who has breathed courage into me, Justin Woodard. Justin is the visionary third-generation owner of Woodard Cleaning Restoration, with a clear purpose of helping people get back to their lives. Justin is passionate about personal and leadership development and is committed to creating a culture where every team member feels a deep sense of belonging. Justin, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much, Mark. It's really great to be with you today.
I've been starting each of these with just a question of, when in your life did you realize that you couldn't, or at least didn't have to, lead and accomplish everything you wanted to by yourself?
Maybe I was lucky, but it was not necessarily, didn't feel lucky at the time. Because I've grown up watching my dad do a similar, job that I'm doing now, I got sort of an inside look at what it means to be a leader, or what it means to own a business, what it means to have big goals and aspirations, and what it means to have customers, and, what it means when things don't go as planned. And, I have a pretty vivid memory of one particular situation where my dad was really struggling. And I think watching him struggle when I was in high school was actually the first indicator that I had that if I did try to go at it alone, I didn't have as good of a shot. And, what I got to see as my dad, as I watched my dad growing up, and in particular in high school, when he struggled, he had a support system around him. And he had, he had my mom, first of all, and having a partner that is committed to health in lots of different ways seemed essential from what I remember. He had a couple of key people at Woodard inside the business. And these were folks that were not only helping him accomplish the things that he and the team set out to, but they were also keeping an eye on him. Probably for my mom, but they were watching out because, dad would have a tendency to push himself, and, they were there to make sure that, when he needed to take a little bit of time, he took some time, or if he needed help, they could call my mom and make sure that she was supporting. And then I also watched him, not only with the rest of the people at Woodard, but I also noticed him looking outside of Woodard to get help and support. And at that time, I think it was with a organization called Vistage, where he had essentially a outside set of advisors that he could take an issue to, he could process a situation, and they had, similar, or at least personal experiences to be able to share and, kind of feed back into the thing that he was struggling with at the time. And so I feel pretty, as I'm sitting here just kind of recapping these things with you, I feel pretty grateful that I had that example so early in my life. Like there wasn't one of the first people that I saw, doing business was getting help for all around him. And that was the example that I had. That was how you did it, is you didn't do it all by yourself. And I got to watch him, when he was trying to do a little bit too much on his own, he would struggle, and then he would get help, and sometimes he was able to ask for it. And other times, just like you and me, we are not able to ask for it. But if you have the right people around you, that help and support is given, kind of even and especially when you need it.
It's such a cool story. The beauty of what family business can be, where he's actually ahead of you and leading, and you're getting to watch. And, I think about as a high schooler getting to watch that, and now being able to reflect on learning from that. I think about that. That was the first time you could see or remember seeing some other leader getting help systems in place and support in there. What was in your own leadership walk? When did you, in those early days, as you're stepping into leadership, who were some of the early people besides your father? Because that's really cool that was able to be an encouragement to you.
I think the one that stands out in my kind of in between journey, right? And,
Mhm.
so if I think about high school and, living with my parents and then working in the business early, I spent about a half dozen years in Chicago and away from the business in a different company and in a different industry. And I was really fortunate to be able to work with a man named Dean Fisher. And he was
Mm.
the CEO of the startup consultancy that I was working with in Chicago. He had a way of encouraging all of us to be the person that we are meant to be. And one of the things that stands out is that he did this through making sure that we recognized when we messed up, right? And so he
Mhm.
didn't like to, brush things under the rug if there was a misstep, or, we could have done something a little differently, or he had some experience to share that could have informed how we were behaving.
Yeah.
And he was quick to come to when I was, the way I think about it, to the young people and say, hey, you messed up there. And by way of doing that, the encouragement that he provided was that it's okay to mess up. Like, you're brand new. I don't expect you to do everything just right the first time, but when you mess up, we're going to talk about it. We're going to relate it back to the core values that we all talk about, and those things are important to us. And
Wow.
we're going to make our decisions based on that. We are going to, hold ourselves to a high standard. And by the way, one of those things was a standard of how we worked with our customers. And sometimes customers aren't actually always right. And Dean was the first person to show me that, customers and clients can have bad behavior also. And when they do have bad behavior and we talk about it and address it and nothing changes, that we get to fire clients sometimes.
Wow.
And it was a pretty powerful situation to hear, to have this person encouraging me and saying, hey, well, you messed up there. You got to do better next time. We gave the client a couple times, and now you're bringing it back to me, and we're escalating this issue, and I'm going to go talk to them. And we might not be able to work with them anymore if they keep this up. And for a startup to have that level of wisdom, leading the company and saying, hey, we don't have enough money right now to pay all our bills, but we're actually going to hold ourselves to a high standard for ourselves and our clients. We're not just going to take any work that comes.
Yeah.
We have standards and we have behaviors that are unacceptable. So I think, Dean is one of he's certainly the most influential, non-family member in my life. And a lot of that comes with, now as I reflect, is a little easier for me to articulate that he led from a place of values, and he articulated those very early on for everybody in the company. And, they weren't up on, I don't remember them being up on the wall at least, but they were in our meetings. They were how we made decisions about who we worked with, and they were how we made decisions about if we were doing, if we were playing our part in the way that we all committed to.
I just really love both of those examples of what he did. So Dean had a view on mistakes or errors that he wanted to make sure that he was capturing them and learning from them and sharing them across to be able to make sure that you were growing from that error instead of sweeping it under the table, which is often what it happens at companies. They just ignore them. Or somebody comes in and yells and fires the person that made the mistake. And he wasn't doing either one of those with mistakes. He was using them. We've got a common friend that says learning moments. He was making them learning moments there. Really cool. And you felt encouraged by how he treated mistakes.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Oh, and then the second example where he's willing to hold values across not only employees, but also across the entire customer set and say, hey, listen, this is our values. And he was willing to take risk to protect those values. It sounds like a very wise protection of the culture that he was creating.
Yeah, it's one of those special moments. Like, you don't, like, we get exposure and opportunities that we don't necessarily appreciate at the time, and if we're lucky, we're able to articulate them later. And I've been able to keep in touch with Dean in a variety of different ways. Often, I don't feel like it's enough, but I still consider him a friend and somebody that I think fondly about. Every time I get a moment to think about him, I know he's
Yeah.
not only impacted myself and the coworkers at the time, but also when I think about Woodard, there's a handful of people that Woodard would not be the environment that it is today without them. And, Dean is certainly one of those people.
Just thinking about this, whether it's with Dean, or in the last several years at Woodard, if you think back about a challenge where you were faced with a challenging situation and you had to get through it, thinking about that, overcoming it with the help of others, a coach, a mentor, a friend that you were actually able to bring in to help you with that. Anything come to mind about a challenge that you were able to ask for help and guidance on?
I think one of the first, maybe it is because it's one of the first, but it was emotionally charged parts of it too. In our business, because not everybody has repeat water damage occurrences, fortunately, we actually rely on referrals a lot for a lot of the work that we do, because a lot of folks don't know who to call because it's not something that they deal with on a regular basis. And one of the referral groups that we were a part of for a long time, there was a pretty large amount of referrals coming from that. It was in the 15 to 20% of at least one service line of our revenue. And we had a lot of requirements that came along with those referrals.
Yeah.
And the requirements put on more overhead, and, some of the things were hard to do operationally, but, we could count on that revenue. Yeah. And over time, the challenge administratively to do this work, and sometimes we didn't feel like we could charge the amount that we felt like we needed to, but it was a good referral source because it was consistent. We had operations and sales, rubbing some edges. There was complaining and uncertainty and lack of clarity all around this situation. Yeah. What should we do? And, I watched from kind of the sidelines, because I didn't really participate too much each day or on like a daily basis. And I think as I look back, I was thinking that the answer would just be obvious enough that everybody in the group would be like, oh, well, this is clearly what we should get more of this sort of referral revenue, or we should just not take it, or should we put a cap on it? Like, I just felt like it would be clear that what we should do. And it turns out it wasn't, right? It was more complex and uncertain than I appreciated. And the help that I got from my coach at the time was essentially just being able to, listen consistently enough that the third or fourth time I brought up this situation to ask, a couple different questions, and ultimately get to the question that I think was the most important, which is, whose decision is it to either accept referrals or not from this referral source, and what boundaries should be put on the work?
Yeah.
And I hadn't thought about what a decision. That I didn't look at this as a stuck decision. I just looked at it as kind of like, oh, well, we just don't quite know what we're going to do yet, which seems pretty silly to say in those words, but it was stuck. And it was one of those kind of moments of having the light bulb go off, like, stuck decisions at this level probably mean that it's not clear whose decision it is. And, and when I look in, it's like, oh, well, it actually may be clear that whose decision it is, but they're just not participating because it was my decision as somebody that was responsible for both the performance of projects and the sales, right? You needed that person that was on both sides of that situation to be able to be in the accountable decision-making position. And I think the lesson for me for like what makes a good coach in that moment in this situation was about the questions that were asked, and knowing that when something is coming up a couple of times and it actually sounds the same, that there's a question or two that could be asked to understand if something is stuck, or if it's purposefully not moving, or if there is some other plan that has some other time frame. That was pretty impactful to me because it actually resonated so strongly in that situation that there was actually, it was a blind spot that wasn't just about this decision. It was a blind spot about many different decisions that could be, and ultimately that I identified were stuck. that were stuck because I was, either maybe a little bit willfully, but also inadvertently, not engaging with, because I thought that the team would figure it out.
Yeah, it's a great one. I think about the connection between the first share with Dean, who was willing to fire clients that were at risk to hurting the culture and the values, and he ended up owning that decision as the CEO, even though most of his clients' interactions were probably below that. And then you think about this one, you've got a strong team and you're wanting them to be able to make good, solid decisions and empower them. But it got stuck and they needed you to step in and actually make a decision. And so I love that one. And I think it's just an interesting one because sometimes we can't see it in ourselves. And so it seems like it was helpful to have somebody from the outside. I think about on the other side of that. So it's a challenging one. And I've gotten to see that one through the lens, and it's going well now, which is so fun to hear. But I think about like on the positive side, sometimes everything comes together and you just knock it out of the park. And when you reflect on the last, 6+ years as you've stepped into this role, and anything stand out to you that you're just like really proud of from yourself or the team that just went like, bam, we nailed it?
We actually had to deal with we had to be our own customer, which not very many people get to do. And, in our case, you don't really want to do. And we had a warehouse where we stored a bunch of stuff, actually was the victim of a fire. And so it destroyed the whole facility. And we ended up in the situation where we couldn't rebuild in that space in a way that would be additive to our operation or really the neighborhood, frankly, or really we couldn't find any substantial wins to be able to rebuild in the same place. And so we went out and, decided that we would, instead of trying to rebuild, we would try to go find a building that we could consolidate some of our other operational elements into one space. And when I look back at, that sort of decision, it's like a generation decision of like, okay, we're moving and we're going to move a bunch of stuff and we're going to build a facility for our future. The level, like the decision making and the accountability that we set up in that situation, it's like, okay, I'm going to be the owner of the property, and I'm going to have an owner rep that's going to help. And then we're going to hire an outside contractor because we knew what could happen if we were trying to do it ourselves. And then we had our logistics rep that said, okay, well, here's where your decision making is around how we get the fleet through. And then we had a rep from the fire damage team. It's like, okay, how are we going to build this facility to do content? We just had all these things lined out, and we got feedback from the appropriate level of people that were doing the work. And I'd say the budget, we probably could do it a little bit better if we, like, from a clarity of like, okay, we know what it is, but we had targets for the budget, and we got, got reasonably close.
Yeah.
But there were all these different things that really, along the way, lots of different pieces could have gone sideways. And the team was able to get clear on who should be deciding what. We got it planned out and did it in the right order, and we adjusted along the way. And now we're sitting in a facility that is, meeting our needs above and beyond our expectations. And we've got room to grow. And, it's really set up the whole organization to be able to, grow into the future.
I got to see your team lead through this fire and rebuilding, and to come through your facility and see what you have built, what the organization is able to go out and do and share with the community is just phenomenal. So I love those. I love celebrating them with you. And it's so cool to see your team leading through that. If you could go back, and I know what was the year that you stepped into presidency for the business?
Well, let's see, 2014.
Okay. So let's use that year. So, you go back to that younger Justin when you were first taking on the role of presidency of the business and starting to think about owning the whole thing. And, if you could go back and give yourself one piece of advice, What would you like to tell yourself the day you stepped into that role?
I think it would be something around decision making. I think being able to, if I could have had a little bit of a head start, that I had a tendency to be more comfortable the slower the decision. I think being able to have that mirror reflected a little earlier, I think could have helped. I think about it now that I can benefit from making some decisions a little bit faster.
Mhm.
And I often don't need more time to make decisions. And just knowing that that is my tendency, that I like to make decisions thoughtfully and carefully. I think I knew that at the time, but I think what would have been helpful for me to hear is like, hey, Justin, there are times when making decisions a little bit faster will be better for you. And you should just be aware of that. Like we're not trying to make you make decisions fast all the time. It really isn't about, it's not this binary of like, you have to make decisions fast. Like that's how you do it. It's really more about the acknowledgement or the noticing that I'm more comfortable making them more slowly, and that I should be aware of that. And I should tell my team that, and I should give folks around me permission that if I'm making a decision too slowly, that I would benefit and the whole group might benefit if we bring that to the surface. And so we can make a more clear decision that this decision requires slower speed, or we've thought about it enough, or it's not actually going to get any easier or better if we slow it down. We're not going to have all the info. We need to look at our values and make a decision more quickly.
Yeah, I love that. Basically, you would tell yourself it's okay to make decisions faster, align with values, and make the decision. It's a risky thing to do. Decisions are risky, and you would recognize and be self-aware that that's your area to grow, and you take it on. And so there's other people that have the other side of that. So whichever one of the person that's listening, whatever side you're listening from, I think it's such a great advice here. If you're a young president who's looking to build profit and purpose in your business, accelerate your growth, whether it's that you're making decisions too fast or too slow, whichever the challenge and awareness is needed, would be happy to spend 15 minutes with you. You can find a Calendly link at encouragingleaders.com, and I'd love to hear what's on your mind and see how we might encourage you. Other than that, thank you so much for listening. And Justin, thank you so much again for joining us.
Mark, I really appreciate it. Love, as always, chatting with you, sharing experiences, and doing what we can to learn from each other.